my begging and pleading. And, so I got the data the other day and played with it.
Mm. So what would we like to talk about? I mean, do we want to spend a little bit of time talking about the Felix's letter first and then move on to the paper?
Yeah, I'd love to know where we're up to in terms of concrete production of things. So, yeah, Felix's letter, let's start with that. I send it back to Felix, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene, for the comments on the letter. And so I was considering it again, and my reference for evaluating how should this letter be designed and where to address and when should it be sent out is what is the current discussion. And so I'm, for instance, this week was really crazy because of this, what is needed in the scientific community. And I'm still convinced that we need a comprehensive view on the physiology, on the pathophysiology of both of COVID and of the vaccination, because the arguments were never, they were always, as I said, statistic arguments. So we did expect only this rate per 100,000 inhabitants and so on. The occurrence of thrombosis or deaths by thrombosis and so on. But there was really no discussion even in quality papers about the physiology. So, and I don't know if the people like, let's say, the editor of Lancet would accept. I mean, why should they accept something if you have a good, if you say, think systemically, and they say, yeah, but can you prove why it is better? And I think if we could prove that systemic physiology, if you have, no, let's start again. If you have a framework to consider the singular events like vaccination complications, faster manifestation of cerebral problems and so on, that you have a more wise strategy to fight the virus, then it would be nice. But if you can't prove it, even a posteriori, you can't prove it, then it's hard, because you say, okay, we are the church of system thinkers, and you must believe us. If you join us, then everything will be better. And I think this is not the style editor has to filter all these letters which they receive every day. And this is what I don't know. I'm unsure. Some weeks it would be very good if we had a letter to the editor, because it fits into the atmosphere and of the general discussion. And right now I'm a little bit insecure because the problems are not defined. We have an increase of the wave. So there's the third wave coming in Germany, the third wave in Austria. Israel says we have all under control because we have a the highest rate of unvaccinated people. So in Israel, if you say think systemically and you will handle this problem better, they will just laugh, I think. They would not be convinced, because they say we have a technological solution. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a little bit insecure about these things, because the effort to write something, to reshape the letter, and convince the editor from a good journal would be a little bit problematic. I don't know. So this is I'm a little bit insecure. But how long should the letter be, and how many arguments, and should we, I mean, there's one positive thing, that our paper in Frontiers in Translational Medicine will appear in the next days. It should appear yesterday, but there were some editorial problems, layout problems. And so I will see what happens if this is on the market, so to say. Yeah. But
Felix, I think you've got a great opportunity for a letter, but the letter has to have a big hook on it that grabs the editor. And
yes.
to me, the hook is the following: we've gone a whole year with no treatment, and that's hook number one. And the reason we went a whole year with no treatment is the delay in production of vaccines. It was really a failure to come up with reverse transcriptase inhibitor drugs. And it was a failure to use pathophysiology understanding to give you existing drugs to treat the host. That's what 2020 was about. If you did a post-mortem on 2020, that's what you'd arrive at. So going forward, the reality check is the following: that the vaccine doesn't cover every member of the population. So you still have a percentage of the population who are vulnerable and not covered by vaccines. And the pathophysiology and systems analysis is really fundamentally important for those people. The issue of the vaccine is we should be now taking the systems analysis that tells us treating the host is important to treating the host for adverse reactions if they occur with a vaccine. And so it keeps coming back to the same thing over and over and over. It's a systems analysis around treating the host. And really, until we get to that point, we're kind of lurching from one approach to the other without a systematic approach.
Don't you think that an editor would simply say, well, we do have treatment. We have improved the recovery rate of severe COVID. There are fewer people dying per these days than did at the beginning. And you've got, dexamethasone is bloody good. But what is obvious, I think, is there's clinical trial after clinical trial, vitamin D, ivermectin, all of which you read in JAMA and it has no effect. Somebody's wasting buckets of dough, not applying systems-based thinking, not applying rigor. You could have almost predicted dexamethasone would work from the history of the drug.
Yeah.
And what it does. And I do think that maybe, I hate to do this, you can't cast it in a financial waste of time point of view, rather than an esoteric point of view is we ought to know our physiology.
Yeah, and this is where I'm coming from. If you look at dexamethasone, it only works in the seriously ill COVID patients.
I agree with that.
It doesn't work earlier. And so what you want is treatments to prevent people even having dexamethasone, if you follow me.
To keep people out of hospitals.
Yeah, we want them out of it. And we want the 20% who are hospitalized to be like the 80% who are not. And but I agree, dexamethasone has been fantastic for those seriously ill. And by the way, Eugenie, I think there's evidence to say that the dexamethasone and the RAS system are almost counter-opposed, aren't they? And so you'd expect at the early stage dexamethasone not to be beneficial.
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think that there was studies years ago showing that dexamethasone promoted, if I'm correct, angiotensin II type activities, that I'd have to go back and check. In other words, I can understand that there's clearly lots of components to any drug, I imagine that in the seriously ill, you're looking at the anti-inflammatory response of the dexamethasone. But
Yeah.
and I think the reason it doesn't work earlier is it also has a component that interacts with RAS, but I don't think that I don't think it suppresses RAS. I think it goes the other way.
It's a growth. Tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't it a growth? It's a growth accelerator. It accelerates growth pathways.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
All right.
Yeah. So, but Eugenie's, you're absolutely right. The issue is we'd have to argue around dexamethasone, but I think the argument is one of saying we had no strategies based on physiology that enabled us to keep people out of severe disease.
If I could bend the hook a bit more, get on my hobby horse, we still know nothing about long COVID. It's
Yes.
pathophysiology.
I couldn't agree
and
more.
we don't have
Yes.
a drug. So they're a neglected,
Mm,
significant proportion of people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they're younger.
couldn't agree
And
more.
there's some nasty literature out about long COVID. A study that came out last week in JAMA, and it's really very serious. Percentage of population end up feeling pretty miserable for a long time. Just back on the steroid angiotensin story, the only thing I know for a fact is if you give cortisol to a fetus, you enhance the vascular reactivity to angiotensin 2.
Wow.
Quite spectacularly. That was an experiment I did with Marilyn Winter Coghlan, never expecting angiotensin to be enhanced, expecting the catechols to be enhanced, but it was the wrong way around.
Wow. That's interesting.
I think you may be right that there is a interaction. I just had to dig that out the memory bank.
So let's go back to Bevan's comment. And this is where, Felix, what you keep highlighting all the time, and the integration is so important. If you looked at other viruses and said, well, what other virus does this, hangs around for a long time? Well, the most obvious example is shingles, herpes zoster.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're making a mistake of thinking that the virus went through a human and then something happened later on, as opposed to saying, well, maybe the virus hasn't gone away. And in other words, it's gone to levels that are low to be detected, but still there. And that's what happens. That's what happens with herpes zoster. It sits in the nervous system, and when it's ready, it replicates and takes off again.
Yeah.
Because I think
When
there's
the person
evidence
is
out.
stressed,
Yeah.
when the person is old and stressed.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
There's evidence out there. I heard it was a BBC report saying that people who have long COVID, if they're given vaccination, then they get relief within days
Oh.
of the long COVID, which tells me that the virus probably hasn't left them. So you've got to
still
say,
there.
well, so where is the virus? Well, the second major risk factor, apart from age, for COVID is obesity. And why? Because the adipocytes have their own ACE2 RAS system. And if you look at obese individuals, they can be carrying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 kilograms of lipid. And it's an incredible reservoir for the virus. And so if you look at, then if you look at the nervous system, I mean, the CNS is 50% lipid. Every axon and white matter is covered in lipid. And so if I was a virus, that's where I'd be off to. No antibody's going to get me in there. And I'll have an ACE system in there that I can hang on to. And so, Bevan, you've been talking about the lipid soluble ACE inhibitors being effective in the CNS. But that makes sense because those lipid soluble ARBs will get into that tissue.
Yeah, probably the statins too.
what I'm thinking is there's an awful lot here, and I think what you probably need in your letter, Felix, is some kind of diagram to convey the 1,000 words. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just share quickly a diagram we did on sepsis? It was in our sepsis paper. So I think the story is possibly comparable. So we put this little diagram together. It's a systemogram, and it's looking at survivors from sepsis. Can you see this okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So survivors from sepsis. So the survival rate from sepsis is 80%. Yeah. But 20% of sepsis survivors suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and a psychological effect. Yeah. 50% of sepsis survivors suffer from post-septic syndrome, which has a long-term physical impact on their life. Yeah. 40% of sepsis survivors are readmitted within 30 days to hospital. Yeah. And over a 2-year period, they're 10 times more likely to have an infection and be readmitted. So maybe some kind of diagram like this could be done for long COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we've got an emerging story that is internally consistent from the virus, the vector, the jump, the spread, the dysregulation of RAS. The lung and vasculature are the two preeminent sites in my mind. And we've got a good story around those. And I think we've got a good story around long COVID. I think we can assemble this in a way that no one's assembled it before. In other words,
Can I ask about how we assemble it, though? I mean, we put comments in and send them back to Felix.
Yeah.
But, and which makes it difficult for him.
Yeah.
My feeling was, Felix, the letter was far too long.
Yes.
For Lancet, and those Lancet likes very short, punchy letters.
Yes. Yeah.
But what you were saying was very valid, and I wondered about Bevan's recommendation with that journal, which I've since forgotten because the brain doesn't work well. Peter Farrell, that had the Peter Farrell argument.
Jeff Farrell.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder I like the idea of a letter that says, here's a problem, guys. And this is why you need to look at it. And I quite like that diagram, Gary, because it does take you out into long COVID very nicely. So how do we put it together to get a letter? Let alone an article on the pathophysiology.
Yeah.
I think the pathophysiology is a long review style paper of a different format than others have put out. But I agree, Eugenie, that I think we need a letter that really predates this by saying we just keep going back all the time to the need for a systems analysis, and there needs to be a systems analysis here for the following reasons, and then maybe have a diagram like that at the bottom which illustrates it.
Yeah.
Then later we have a bigger, more comprehensive activity.
Yeah. What we could do, Felix, is my system stuff really I try and do on a Saturday. It's really the only day I find any time to do any of this stuff. Maybe we could get together for an hour and a half or a couple of hours on Saturday morning or midday around there, and try and work on a diagram, the systemogram together. Yeah, is that something you'd be able to do?
I think my competence in COVID physiology is too low, because if and I always wanted to motivate some clinicians to work together. And a friend of mine, he was thinking to participate, but then he rejected because he said, I have so many problems in my hospital. So
Yes.
this is really scientists can do such things, but so this is the problem, because if we just have if the diagram is not let's say safe against criticism somehow, because it's cleverly constructed and also based on the empirical data, empirical evidence which is available right now, then we have then we have more problems than if we write a text which needs much more interpretation. I mean, I'm totally totally like I like it very much that diagrams and all these things, but for a letter it's too concrete maybe. So I think the verbal, if you have, as Jean was saying, so if you just push and or Richard was saying, 1 year no treatment, pathophysiology was, in my words, was too focal. Yeah, it was not comprehensive enough or not multi-organ related. It was just looking to the lung and ignoring for a long while the affection of the heart, of the vessels, of the blood, and so on and so forth. And that also the vaccine is not covering everything. And so we need this and that. So if we have, I think Richard could write it down what he was thinking, and this would be enough. It's just a quarter of a page, and this would be more a hammer for the editor to say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, we give it to the public. But if you have a diagram, then probably it's to they say, what does this arrow mean? And no, there must be feedback, and this is maybe too concrete for the for a pushing impulse. And I want to state something. I don't want that we, so to say, use the time now we have for discussing this letter, if nobody has so to say, an impulse to say, now I know how the letter should be structured, and only half a page, yeah, just a really a bullet, yeah, so to say, and we could use the time to work on the papers or on the publication, which were, because if we have published, then we can demonstrate. And the reviewers say yes or no, and if we pass the reviewers, then we have the public, yeah, and then we find maybe some other people which join us, but the letter to the editor is much more, I think. I don't know what the effect will be. So the editor says, "Aha, this is a nice letter," and then people say, "Yeah, this is a good opinion," but what's the next? What's really the result?
So Felix, I'll send some dot points through, and including what I think is a mystery. If you look at HIV, vaccines effectively didn't work, but reverse transcriptase drugs did. And it seems that COVID is precisely the reverse, and no one is saying why.
Well, I've got to say that's beyond me, Richard. I have no idea why.
Well, the HIV story was quite logical because the HIV mutates so rapidly that the vaccines could never keep up with it. And so the effort was put into the reverse transcriptase, and it worked. You know, drugs like efavirenz and rilpivirine and so on and so forth. But with this, last year I thought we'd do much better with reverse transcriptase drugs than clearly has happened. And so I think the letter should say that, unlike HIV, for example, we don't have that. We don't have that now, armamentarium. We're stuck with the vaccine pathway. But I'll put those dot points together.
Well, how about circulating them to everyone rather than leaving it on poor old Felix's lap?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
And then somebody could put the whole composite back together again and see.
Yeah.
But it's got to be punchy. And I mean, interestingly, you mentioned organ. The review I read of this trial of long COVID, the major long-term physical sequelae were in the lung, and the
Yeah.
heart and the kidney were not. And
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
apart from the fatigue and everything. Sorry, I've got a cough.
Yeah.
I would
And-
like to
and-
say that I support what Gary's saying about that diagram of sepsis. It was brilliant. And I think visual representation really will catch people's eyes and focus them on the message.
Yeah.
Maybe you could try and I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just try and think of, you know, the main messages that you want to say about long COVID. And if I've got something to work from, I can start to work on a diagram, and then we can review it again and improve it
Yeah.
over time. Yeah, but I need something to give me a bit of a starting point.
Gary, with where we are at the moment, we've got that very rough draft out there of a paper, but I went back and used the model that I think you referred to as the Wonderful Journey, or whatever the film was called.
Oh, right, the Fantastic Voyage, yes.
Fantastic Voyage, to go from the vector through. Now, last night or yesterday, your time, or today, your time, I sent out some updated versions on that PowerPoint. Did you want to have a quick look at those and
Yeah,
see
sure.
where
Do you want to share?
I,
Yeah, because I haven't seen that.
Can
I
you,
sent
can,
I sent it as an attachment to an email to everyone. Yeah.
yeah, can you open it and share on your screen, or do you want me to do it?
I don't. Can you do it? Because
I can do.
I may have troubles at this end. Yeah.
Right, just give me a moment. I'll try and find it.
It went to probably about 8-9 hours ago.
Yeah, well, I went to the Kreutzer Sonata last night, so I slept.
Good on you. Eugenia, I sent you some references to vector ACE2 in bats and other creatures during the week, in which people have looked at the binding affinities in the bat. And there's no question that in my mind, that the binding affinity in the human is much greater than it is in the vector.
Well, what is interesting was that paper I sent you.
Yeah.
It said that it was a dissociation.
It is.
Bad luck, Bevan. It's a dissociation of COV2 that is slow compared to COV.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
SARS makes you really crook and sick.
Yeah.
But the
Exactly.
COV2 tends to be lingering around, which
it
comes back perhaps to the etiology of long COVID too, as well. I mean, what do we know about the ACE2 activity in people post-COVID?
Yeah. Did you find it, Gary? Yeah.
This is it, yeah?
Yeah, okay. We went through it, and we won't go through the stuff we covered before, but let's just
Say
zip
when
our way.
say when to stop.
Yeah. Okay, stop about there. Just go back a bit, back a bit, back a bit. Okay, stop there. So what this is picking up on, Felix, your point, which is modern systems theory, saying look across the whole thing where we're saying vector to host. So what I want to do is go down this magical road from the vector, be it a bat or a pangolin or whatever, a mink, all the way through to the human and the outcome, and then modify the paper accordingly. So go to the next slide, Gary. And that's where it picked up the fact that the virologists tell you that the targets are invariably conserved proteins. In other words, across mammals or from birds to mammals, it's those proteins that in an anthropological way have been conserved through thousands, if not millions of years. And that then gives you the platform for the virus to leap across. And ACE2 Eugenie, you dug out the data there showing ACE2 is a pretty ancient protein. And all it means is evolution couldn't improve on it. It just kept giving it to us all the time, both in vectors and in humans. That's very good because it's efficient, but it's very bad because it's a target. Next slide. Eugenie, your point is this one. That diagram from N to C is the 1200 amino acids in the spike protein. And you can see an S1 subunit and S2 subunit. If you look at the top, you'll see SARS-CoV-2's got that little red bit in the middle. That little red bit in the middle is the difference between the SARS-CoV-2 and the SARS-CoV. And it's the bit that is the furin cleavage site. So that site at 685 on the spike protein can be cleaved, so that the S1 subunit now is much more flexible than the entire protein. And the entire protein you would have in SARS-CoV, you would have effectively this very flexible subunit with SARS-CoV-2, and that very flexible subunit, if I link it up to what you're saying, Eugenie, is now not dissociating off its receptor site on ACE2 as readily as a longer version of this protein would. And by the way, that RBM is the receptor binding motif that binds to the ACE2. It's not big. It's about 70 amino acids sitting in that motif on the spike protein that binds to the ACE2. The most logical thing to do here is find an existing drug that simply binds to that viral motif. And I've seen no one we've looked for everything else, but I haven't seen anything that says that we do that, and that's not beyond doing, because those sequences below are the critical ones. A good structural biologist will tell you what that site looks like, and in silico we should be able to do it. I'm going to take that up with some other individuals that I know have those skills. Okay, next slide. And this is picking up again on what Eugenie was saying around the ACE2 being important and ancient and so on and so forth. But if you map across species from rat, which doesn't get infected, to humans and monkeys that do, why? Because our ACE2 just happens to be in a configuration that the virus loves. Next slide. And this is one where we showed that really, to me, the driver of the whole infection with COVID is a shift in affinity. The virus is jumping from an area where it is bound loosely to a receptor to the human where it's bound very, very tightly. And so it's a KDKA activity, and with SARS-CoV-2 being modified over SARS-CoV, its binding is much tighter, and therefore it goes. And if you look at this in a pharmacokinetic way, you would say that makes sense, because the molecule's going from a site of low affinity to high affinity, but it's going to try and do something else. It's going to go to an equilibrium. In other words, the equilibrium is the pandemic as it tries to spread itself from human to human. Next slide. And this is one where I did it, illustrated it. On the left, you'd need, say, 10 molecules to get one in to be replicated 10 times, but even then you would only infect one cell in the vector. On the other side, if you said you had high affinity in the human, you'd have 2 molecules to get one in, be replicated 10 times, and then you'd infect another 5, and you can see how the gradient works. Next slide.
Nice.
And so then I said, okay, how does this fit with what we know? Well, what we know was that mask wearing, social distancing, and lockdowns work. And why do they work? Because you don't need many particles of the virus to cause the infection. So if you have effective barriers in place, then you're going to prevent that happening. And that's really what we've been. And really 2020, this picture here is what 2020 was about. That's all we had. We had nothing in terms of the vaccine or treatment. Next slide. And the next question to say is, well, what happens with the other risk factor, which is age? And that's the number one risk factor of the lot. Well, this is a model of what happens to your immune system when you age. And I won't go through it in detail, but I think the key one here is not only the decrease in the antibody production that occurs with age, but it's the decrease in the number of T cells. T cells rule the roost in the immune system. So that when you're young, you have not only a large population of T cells, but you have a reservoir of T cells that aren't clogged up with memory. And so they're highly effective. And so if you only need 1 or 2 particles to set this disaster in place, if you're young with a good immune system and you've got lots of T cells in place, you're going to be okay. But if you're older, your production of naive T cells has fallen off. And the T cells you've got are weak in terms of their activation, then of course you're going to be liable. And so it kind of fits that model. Next one.
Can I just ask a question?
Yep.
So is that true of all of the elder population, or are there pockets of the elder population who still have a good proportion of T cells?
It's a good question, and I've kind of dug into it a bit. I think it's a generalization across a whole population. What you're seeing here is the reality, but you can modify it. And there's no question there's a lot of emphasis around diet, and more particularly around the microbiome at the moment, and diet in terms of in terms of regulating the immune system. And it looks very good, actually, the data that's coming out. So the answer would be is you can't reverse the tide here. This is not a King Canute game, but you can probably put up a couple of sandbars and stop it going into trust. So that's what it's about. But I think what it does do is it fits the epidemiology that says the elderly and the older are at risk compared to the young. And the reason they're at risk is because of the high affinity binding. If you've got a good system, you're going to be safe. But with high affinity binding, if you've got a weak T cell population, you're in deep trouble. Next slide.
Yeah. And some of the HLA type models have a role there too, Richard, with the affinity thing that affects your T cell, what's your MCR, the recognition part, and the T cell interaction. So I just remember that because we never got to the bottom of why people that were from the Middle East did so badly compared to everyone else, and Black Americans, even after you adjust for social status and poverty and things.
But I think it's the number one risk factor, and it's explained by saying when you've got a lethal virus, lethal in terms of high affinity, you can't afford to have any particles floating around. You've got to get rid of the lot, and that's why we're making vaccines at the end of the day. Next slide. This explains why mutations. In other words, if you move like we have, and Eugenia, I sent you the paper showing now that the UK mutation is binding more tightly to ACE2 than the non-mutated SARS-CoV-2. And so you can see quite clearly now, instead of having 2 molecules to get one in, with the mutated version in this model, you get 1 to get one in. It gets replicated 10 times, and now you've got a massive number of particles to cause infection. Next slide. Okay, now this is where, Felix, I picked up on your point, which is the dysregulation. So if you look at the top there where I've got ACE2, angiotensin 1,7 and angiotensin sitting on a fulcrum, and I kind of borrowed the fulcrum from that model that you had of the coat hanger version and the rest of it. I think from birth, we all have inflammation. And I put inflammation as a fire because it goes back to the Latin origins of this word, and inflammation. So
Mm.
it means to kindle or to light.
Mm.
And so we all have inflammation, but that information is kept in track by this balancing act that goes on between ACE2 and angiotensin 2. And so the fire is small, except if you've got diabetes and hypertension and other areas that promote that fire that I haven't put in here and should. However, I was more concentrated here on the virus. So you get the virus particle coming through, knocking out the ACE2 and the angiotensin 1-7, and now the angiotensin 2 kicks in and the fire becomes enormous compared to what it was before. In other words, the inflammation just takes off.
Mm.
And I think, to me, that's the essence of what's going on. The binding, high affinity is driving the spread, but concurrently it's also driving the inflammation. It's those two things are happening together. And that's shown on the next slide. Even the slide itself gave me the shivers when I put it together, because you can see exactly what's happening. That not only is the spread being driven by the high affinity, but everywhere the spread goes, the inflammation goes with it.
Yeah. I love the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the origins of the word, and
Yeah.
it's just such a good description of inflammation. And but you can see when you just look at that one image and you get it straight away.
Yeah.
So spread and inflammation hand in hand, sweeping their way through the system.
Yeah. Yeah, and what that inflammation does is it also suppresses the adaptive immune system. It down regulates the learning response.
Yeah.
Which again is obviously to huge advantage to the virus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we go back to the previous slide, and Bevan, you circulated the paper, the review paper, arguing again for ARB. And I haven't built the slide yet, but if you've got an ARB, you correct that balance and you start to extinguish that fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same thing would apply to anything else that fiddle around with RAS and the rest of it. So let's go forward again, Gary. So, and to the next one. So what I'm about to do now is use the same magnificent journey model, Gary, that you referred to in the film, now to work my way through the lung, looking at the different mast cells, those that have chymase, those that don't. What's the relationship between the alveolar cell and the rest? And then say, okay, now the virus is going to escape into the pulmonary vasculature. What's it doing to the endothelial cells? It'll get to the heart, it'll get to the brain, it'll be into long COVID. And then let's stand back and look at the entire system then and say, okay, where are you going to intervene here? And really that's what's been missing in the whole game.
Yeah, I love it.
So you're going to have to give me, there's a lot of more reading I've got to do. I'm fairly up to date on pulmonary, but it's coming out all over the place. And so I want to be comfortable and I'm across the literature. So I think it'll be about 2 or 3 weeks before I can get through this lot.
Richard, what do you think is the contribution of renally produced angiotensin 1 and its conversion across the lung to the pulmonary symptoms? You're talking about an intrapulmonary RAS.
Yeah.
And yet if you look at the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, the lungs are really a gateway to producing angiotensin 2. So
I'd agree with all that. And I might step back and say that the impression I'm getting in the lung is when the lung's operating properly, it's not a big angiotensin 2 generator in its own right. But it's using angiotensin 2 as a tripwire for all of these mast cell type events that occur. So that it's a low activity, but my God, it's a critical activity, because if it trips, it sets the the mast cells racing. And when the mast cells race, they've got the capability of shifting to a non-traditional RAS
Yeah.
with chymase. But if you then plug in the renal system and say that the lung clears angiotensin 2, well, it
No,
makes
it
a lot.
makes angiotensin 2. It makes
But
it doesn't clear it.
I thought it was
Angiotensin-
clearing.
Angiotensin 1 is produced in the lymphatics, in the
Okay.
kidney, and comes up into lymphatics and venous circulation, hits the lung, and is
And then
turned
they
to
right through.
angiotensin 2.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I could think there, in fact, is worth looking at. I'd have to look at the literature there, but off the top of my head, I'd say that if that's the case, then you're very dependent on ACE2 keeping
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
angiotensin 2 under control.
Well, that was my argument
Yeah.
way back when I did that lecture
Yeah.
for the Royal Society.
Yeah. It's a very good point. And so, and it also means that those individuals pumping out more angiotensin 1
Yeah.
are going to be at higher risk, which are the hypertensives, presumably.
Yeah.
And
We
it
don't
also
know.
links back to the sympathetics, Felix.
Mm. Yes.
So I think we've got enough. We've got enough collective ability around the table here to be able to pull this all apart all the way through, step by step. Because what people have done is they've all gone out and described single slices of the cake.
Mm.
But what I haven't seen is the whole cake.
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
This picture is very good for the whole cake.
Yeah.
I mean, this slide.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have if we could have a diagram, Gary, representing this, might be a more symbolic diagram, but it would show the systemic aspect of the virus. So this
Yeah.
I like this very much. This summary of the overview on what is, and this could be a skeleton of the letter maybe.
Yeah.
And Jennifer,
I'll push on with it, Gary.
Yes. And if Bevan can send me, a few thoughts on long COVID,
Right.
we could perhaps turn into a diagram. I'll have a go at that.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a recent excellent paper, which is unrefereed, saying that the long COVID is definitely oxidative stress,
Yes.
whereas early on not.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you seen? Is that on is that a pre-publication?
Yes, it came from a very good Cambridge group, and was based on a couple of hundred patients.
Mm.
Came out about 2 weeks ago, I think. So I'll send it around.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
nice, yeah.
What should I be doing at the moment? I missed the first part of the meeting, but that letter of Felix's, are we working on that still?
Yes, we are. But what we need to do is we need to condense it and make it punchy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you want me to have a go at that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say English is not my first language. I'm laughing about that because I think Felix has a better command of English than me. But
Jenny, Jennifer, I sent my comments back to Felix's letter the other day.
okay.
I don't
So
know whether you got them, whether I circulate them to all or just to Felix.
I think I
saw
got
it
them,
as
but
well.
Yeah.
Okay, Felix, are you okay if I take the letter with Eugenie's comments on it and
Yes,
trying
sure.
to make it shorter?
Yes, I'm very happy because we said we have to boil it down. This was the first
Yeah.
part of our session.
Okay.
I'll send you over the recording. Well,
opinion,
I'll send the
must
recording
be-
over as well.
Gary,
so you
can you,
catch up on the conversation?
talking of the recording, can you do me a favour and take out all those comments I made about Melbourne? It's all right, Jenny, I'll explain
Yeah.
later.
Well, this is only made available to us anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd like that data.
You'd
I'd
like it taken
that
out.
data taken out because it's, you
I
know,
think-
I've derived it from other people's data.
Yeah, I'll try and do that. Yeah. If I can't, I won't post it at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Jenny, I'll explain later.
Right.
It's all good. Thanks, Eugenie. Sorry, I got a bit caught up with things today. But okay, well, that sounds good. And the work that you're doing, or that you're talking about today, Richard, that I know you've been working on for a long time, is that what we're going to put together in a sort of structured themed issue? Is that what we're aiming for, or are we still trying to do this original plan for the PRP? Sorry, I'm big picture thinking here.
Yeah, I'm in my mind's eye. If we could have a review style article that was systems analysis based from the
Okay.
vector all the way through to survival or death in a human,
Yeah.
that's what we need, because no one's got that out there.
No,
other
okay, that sounds good. So that's pretty much a priority then at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's better for outcomes for everybody, but I just need to tell the journal what we're doing in terms of timeline. So I'll just say to them that we're working on a bigger review at the moment,
Yeah.
and that we'll probably aim to get something else along the lines of what we submitted to the editorial board, but that might be 3 or 4 months, I think. Yeah.
I think
okay.
if we do it thoroughly,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can be, you know, that we at the moment we have a rough draft of a paper, but it's quite rough. But by going down this PowerPoint road,
Yeah.
I think I can get the systems approach into it, and so from
Yeah.
that we can transfer that into the paper.
Yeah.
I
That
think
sounds good.
personally, if you just made a paper based around your presentation,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
really that is really a lovely encompassing picture that sets a scene for looking at the whole.
Yeah.
You know, that PowerPoint, if we can turn that into an article,
Yeah.
I think says everything.
And we have to be, because some of the bits we don't know all of it. Some of it is assumptions based on what we know about pharmacology and physiology. So I guess it would give us an opportunity to, if we send it around the group, just to critique it as well, and that might make the article stronger. Because there's some bits that clearly you've worked out all the bits, Richard, and I think that's amazing. But I still feel like there's some bits of the physiology that we're not quite sure. Well, maybe it's just me. Anyway, yeah. What I think I'm saying is, for the review, it would be good for everyone to also critique all the assumptions, just in case we're not right on something. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely critical. Yeah, and the tricky bit is now going into the lung and into the blood vessels, because the literature is just pouring out in those areas.
Yeah, I think your overview, starting right back and just explaining in simple steps about infectivity and inflammation is really a theme setter for going further on. And I really do like the story of the bats versus the humans. I mean, I don't think people are thinking like that.
No, but it's fundamental pharmacokinetics.
Yeah,
I know, but it's just because your brain is so big, Richard, you've taken an idea from something else and applied it to this. I mean, I didn't even think of it. And then when you described it, I thought, oh, that's so amazing. Like, I can't even imagine how you thought of it, to be honest, but it's cool. It's really exciting.
But I think there's something also a mystery in here. And you know that if you were doing this as an experiment on the bench, where you had something moving from low affinity to high, it does a bit more than that. It wants to get to equilibrium. So it not only just goes to the first binding site, with a replicating system, it will go to every binding site. And that's actually the basis of a pandemic. And so the pandemic is going to equilibrium. That's really what it's about. And coming behind this virus is the mutation, which will do exactly the same thing and then displace the first one.
That's good.
Yeah.
And if I look at how we're approaching these things, we're kind of lurching around in the dark, aren't we?
Yeah, all we're doing is looking at vaccines and then changing the vaccine as the virus mutates. So we're always chasing the virus.
Yeah. And heaven help us if it ramps up at speed like HIV did.
I know. Yep.
Or if it gets into mosquitoes.
Yeah.
I know. Then we toast.
Yeah.
I've got another diagram that you might find fun, in terms of maybe inspiring some ideas. So can I share this? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if I mentioned it, but in one of my jobs at work, I was the lead architect for the Saudi Arabian Northern Border Protection System. And I think I might have told you about this, Eugenie, when I did the little poster. Yeah, I did a poster at the Angiotensin conference. So this is border control in the gut. Yeah,
yep.
And you can. This was a great paper from Nature Reviews. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, this is border security. this is what we do. This is highly analogous to the border security solution we designed. So we've got friend or foe that's out there. Yeah. You've got border control in terms of the tight junctions, so that there are crossing points across the barrier. Yeah. You've got proximity alarms. With these cells, is it the PANS cells?
Well, it's the IgM, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you made by those. Oh, the first. No, it's not IgM, is it? That comes late. That comes later, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I think it's IgE.
We've got surveillance. We've got surveillance taking place on the toll light receptors.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got intelligence processing in the Pierce patches.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got responsive force training taking place as well, with the macrophages conveying. Is it conveying information to the T cells, or is it the way around? I think it's the other way around, isn't it? But nature has got all of these different features which are directly analogous, and you've even got so in our border security we had sand berms, okay, which were basically delaying the approach of the invaders across the border, and these cells are producing a mucus layer, again to slow stuff down. So all of these different features that we see in border security, we see taking place here, and I don't know, but I'm just wondering if in our suite of diagrams we could have, I don't know, something analogous to this. I don't know. It's just something that came to my mind.
Gary, the Royal Society had a series on this mimicry, where they actually used a single cell and equated it to everyday function. That's quite astonishing. But there is a really important issue here, and it's convergence. So if you look at evolution, it converges around what works, but it doesn't have to be linked. And I'll give you an example. A bat wing and a bird wing are effectively the same, but they didn't come from the same origin.
Yeah, they came from different places,
all that happened is through convergence, you landed at the most effective process.
Yeah.
Then humans come along, and through convergence in thinking, come up with an aeroplane wing.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, the principles of an aeroplane wing, a bat wing, and a bird wing are the same. They didn't come from the same origin at all. It's convergent thinking. And so you see a lot of this convergence going on. And it's really important to understand, because that way you understand the vulnerabilities of humans and to viruses, for example. And so it's a good, you're absolutely right in putting it up. It's a good, it's a good model. And what you could do here is show the convergence occurring with a vector versus a human in terms of that ACE target. And you know, both are using it, and it's a conveyor belt from one to the other.
The diagram that you were showing, which was showing, you know, the different scenarios or the different stages. Maybe we could have not just words around those things, but diagrams which show the, you know, the biological context. You know, images which we annotate, and I think that would be very powerful.
Yeah, it would. It would. The Jenny, this is a TED talk for you.
It's for you, Richard. I was thinking that we can just be. It's almost like taking it to the community level, isn't it? It's so. I mean, it's so complex yet it's so beautiful, and I think people could follow it if it was explained well. Yeah.
I don't know if you folks saw it, but Eugenie did a lovely presentation for one of your local groups. I can't remember which one it was, Eugenie, but that was a great presentation explaining, you know, the good and the bad, you know, side of the angiotensin system. Did you folks see that?
No, was it Royal Society? Was it?
Yeah, that's the Royal Society YouTube.
Oh,
that was great.
Can you send it, or is it online, or?
I'll see if I've got it.
I've got it. If you can't find it, Eugenie, there's no hiding.
Yeah. No, it's a bit out of date now.
But maybe you could do a follow-up.
Well, I'm just coming back to what Richard and Jenny were saying. I mean, basically, though, that presentation you've developed, Richard, would make an incredibly good lay talk.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. And it would introduce the whole, you know, it would introduce on a public forum rather than trying to go to a specialist journal.
No, I agree.
So could you do a TED talk or a YouTube or?
Yeah, but I tend to wander off, and Jenny would be much better, or yourself.
It's your work, Richard. That's all. I mean,
I know.
Maybe we could do it together.
I'd find something interesting halfway through and just completely wander.
Yeah, I know. Look, I'm like that too, but I have learned to be disciplined.
I'm not disciplined enough. Flamenco's okay, but this is more difficult.
I reckon it would be good. I mean, whatever you think, it needs to be out there, but it is your work, Richard. That's all.
But
I mean, you could do it as a team. I don't know if people. I think I have seen TED talks with two people.
But I wouldn't have thought of going from looking at this from the bat to the human if I wasn't talking to you guys in terms of a systems approach. It was that was the trigger for saying, let's look at this differently. So,
well, it could be on behalf of this group, but someone presents it. And
that's the problem with current thinking in science, is that we just get locked into these silos of specialization and not into a systems thinking.
I think going from the bats to the human is the ultimate in systems.
Same.
Yeah.
It's just so clever.
We do need to put together a little talk and you know, put it on media as well, social media. Definitely. And I mean, we could also, I mean, we do regular presentation sessions at the ISSS, for instance. So we could get you folks to give a talk there as well. Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge audience, but you know, they're all really smart people who take the systems perspective, so it would really be appreciated.
Yeah. I'm happy to help out, but I just am very aware that it's not my work.
I'm going to have to go, Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll circulate those dot points to all of you that I said before.
Is that for the letter?
Yeah, for the letter. Yeah, and I'll push on with the rest. I'm wondering we're telling
protein, and it's this S1 subunit that the ACE2 receptor binds to.
Oh,
Now, when
shit.
that happens,
Someone started the video. I think it's Felix.
Someone started that video to switch off me.
so the enzymes within the cell.
It's very good.
I turn it off. It's good though.
so.
I paused it.
The week after next is Easter, and that Friday is not going to work for me.
No.
And so
Is that
I'm
next
not sure
week?
what I can get done by next week, but I'll try my best.
Okay, so next week we're okay. It's the week after, is it?
The next week we're okay. The week after we're not.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. I'll cancel the week after next then.
Yeah. That's Good
Okay.
Friday. We should all
Yeah.
be in church, Richard.
Holiday.
I think also our summertime ends about Easter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Our,
Yeah.
Oh,
that'll
yeah,
cause-
actually, I did see that because the clocks, it becomes 5:30 a.m. for us.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my
Those-
God.
No, it's 7:30 at the moment, comes 6:30 a.m.
No, I think it, well, then because it was set from
Oh,
the UK
England
and they go
playing good.
forward.
Yeah.
Oh,
England
I see that.
as well.
It's 2 hours of mission. Oh, 5:30's out, guys. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm too old.
Because it'll be 5 a.m. for Richard.
We can switch it for an hour.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, thanks for the conversation, everybody, and thanks for turning up
Thank
again.
you.
It's
That's
very
good. So,
appreciated.
well, I'll wait to get that document from you, Richard. Will I, or has Felix got it?
And I feel it. Felix has that. I'll just circulate the dot points. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll add them into the document from Felix. Thank you. All right.
Okay, well then, Jenny, circulate the letter so that we can have a go at it and move it on more quickly.
Okay.
See you then. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.